Welcome. Thank you for everyone joining us here today and everyone joining us in consciousness. We're going to be continuing today with the Government of Eden, Chapter 2, the Genesis of Identity. Let's be still a few moments in preparation for our reading. Thank you. Starting on page 15. There are two levels of consciousness. There is the spiritual, incorporeal level, as described in the first chapter of Genesis. On this level, man created in the image and likeness of God shows forth neither sin, disease, death, lack, limitation, nor any of man's inhumanity to man. Those born into the consciousness of the first chapter of Genesis have neither father nor mother. They are the Melchizedek consciousness. They are not physical offspring. They have no human parentage. They are incorporeal. Those born of human parents are born into the level of the second chapter of Genesis, creation, the world of mind, the mortal consciousness, good and evil, which constitutes humanhood. It is this humanhood that makes us think that by destroying our enemy or competitor, we can live and prosper, or that by taking away somebody's freedom, we can become greater. A leaven is necessary to break through the crust of self-preservation. This leaven is the Spirit of God in man, which, when it is raised up, lifts man to its level. And then, instead of man whose breath is in his nostrils, we now have the Son of God, that man who has his being in Christ. The Master acknowledged that there are two men, the man of earth, the creature, the mortal, the viper, and the divine presence within individual consciousness, which when recognized and released, changes man from the man of earth to the Son of God. We speak of God as the creative principle of this entire universe, including man. But actually, that brings up a picture in your mind of God that created something, sometime. And as long as you hold to that belief, you cannot rightly understand the nature of God. For God has never created anything at any time. Any such belief puts God in time and space and with a beginning, and that takes away God's eternality and immortality. I ask you rather see God as an infinite invisible, appearing as this universe, rather than as starting it, creating it, or making it at a time. Let us use the illustration now of the first fruit. As you watch the fruit appear on your tree, you could say, there is God in the act of creation. But that wouldn't literally be true, because that creation began before the first fruit was visible. There was fruit there when it was still in the invisible, when it was, let us say, sap in the tree. But even that wouldn't be right to say that creation began with the sap, because before there was sap, there were elements in the ground, which some action of life drew into the roots of the tree that went to form to sap, that went up to the tree and formed the bud and fruit. But it wouldn't be right to say that creation began with the drawing of the substances in, because the substances were in the ground before the drawing began. And so, if you keep going back and back and back again, you'll find that you cannot locate in time or space when that fruit began to be created. It was going to appear on your tree. And if you go back far enough, you'd find that when it really began, it was when God began. In other words, God did not create the sense that man can create this object, because when you have this object, you have man, the inventor or manufacturer of an object. But when you have this universe, you haven't got God and a universe. There's no God standing separate and apart from the universe, looking off into a universe which he created. God is the substance and the law of this created universe. Therefore, it is more accurate to say God appears as this universe. God unfolds himself as this universe. Let us be still a moment. Thank you. Continuing now on page 24. Watch the Sermon on the Mount. It is a guide to two ways of living. You can choose the one you like best, the law or grace. If you choose the law, you will temporarily have a little easier time of it because you will be conforming to common usage. You'll be going right along with the crowd, right in the swim. On the other hand, if you attempt to live by grace, you will find yourself out of step with this world. You will find yourself peculiar. You'll find yourself sometimes taking losses that you're not entitled to. You'll find yourself sometimes suffering from injustices that you don't deserve. It doesn't deny that for a minute here. In fact, it encourages you to do those very things, because in the end, you'll find you're under God's grace, God's government, God's protection. God's will is being done in you, not the will of man. That's an entirely different life. Right here and now, I accept the grace of God. I accept the grace of God as the allness and onlyness, perfection of my being, my body, my business. I accept God's grace as companionship, as home, as opportunity, as success. I accept consciously grace of God as law unto my being, as the only law operating in my mind, in my consciousness, in my heart, in my life, in my soul, in my being, in my body, in all that concerns me. I consciously accept God as the one influence in my life. I accept the activity of the Christ, the spirit of soul. I accept the love of God as the only love in my experience. I consciously reject any love which is not of God. I consciously reject every love which is not of God, every law which is not of God, every belief which is not of God, anything and everything, material and a mental nature which is not of God. And in doing this, I open myself to receive divine grace in consciousness, to accept the government of God in place of the government of matter and material beliefs and mental beliefs, mortal beliefs and theories and superstitions. Why should I be under the subject of where the stars are in the sky? Why should I be under the superstitions of a church? Why should I be under the superstitions of astrology or theology? Why should I even be under the superstitions of natural law? Why not, in my inner consciousness, realize God's government is supreme and it operates through grace? And I, here and now, accept the grace of God. Now, having done this once, thoroughly and completely, we have at least made room within ourselves to remind ourselves every time that there is the appearance of something contrary to that. We again remind ourselves that it's the grace of God that governs me, not material law, not mental law, and we remind ourselves that spiritual power emanates from within my being and flows out from me to my affairs. Therefore, nothing in the outer realm can act upon me. Whether it's the stars in the sky or the bombs in the sky, nothing from without can enter that defileth or maketh a lie. But all good flows out from me, through me, to me, and all who are within my range of consciousness. That is an activity of truth in consciousness that we must practice, and we must practice it continuously until one beautiful day comes along when all of a sudden something happens within. And when it does, you say, just think, it was all true. Heretofore, I've declared it, but now I know it. There's a difference between declaring it and knowing it. Once it is known, you no more have to declare it. Then you are declaring your name, declaring that 2 times 2 is 4, or declaring that your money is in your right-hand pocket. You do not have to declare anything once you know it. I mean by that, know it with this inner conviction that is called spiritual discernment. And that comes in the second transition when the Christ takes over, announces itself, reveals itself as being on the field and in possession all of your being. You will be surprised at the change that takes place in your life once you have, shall we say, reasoned through or worked through and practiced with it until you have come to an actual conviction that God is spirit, that God is invisible, and that the law of God must be a spiritual law, and that this must be the all power. You see, from the moment that you can even intellectually agree that this must be truth, from that moment on, changes begin to appear. But much more so when, through holding to this truth, maintaining this truth in your consciousness, abiding in it and letting it abide in you, you eventually come to that point of conviction, that point in which you say, ah, before I was blind, but now I see. Before, I may have intellectually agreed, but now I spiritually know and discern God is spirit. Therefore, the government of this universe, the government of your individual life, the government of your collective life must be spiritual. I'm going to continue here with our last reading for today, after which we'll go into silent meditation and leave in silence as per Joel's wishes. Continuing on page 34. We are all one. The only difference, in the same way that an apple is different from a peach or a pear or a plum, different in individuality, but the same in life. With the same source, the same feeding, the same protection, the same government. And then I begin to see that as long as I am one with my source, I am one with each of you. We are all one with each other because the same life flow that is mine is the same life flow that is yours. And let us just reflect on this. God's government is supreme. It operates through grace. Let us be still. Thank you.